Today we're going to take a look at some shapes and try and create them and make them into forms. As you can see here, we have a circle which turns into a sphere, a square which turns into a cube, and then a triangle that turns into a cone. Okay, so now we're going to go from a shape to a form. And I'm going to show you how to do that by shading the shape. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead, collect my materials. I need an object to trace. I'm going to do my shapes circle, and I'm going to use, I picked one color for crayon, a color pencil, a marker, and a regular pencil. So I'll go ahead and trace. What you're looking for. Okay, so I've got my circles traced. I have my materials that I'm going to use. A couple things before we get started. So I've got my shape and I want to create to form. So the first thing I need to do is find a light source. To make these have a form, we want to make it look like it has a dark side and a light side. So I'm going to pick one spot for all four of them. And I'm just going to say this X over here in the corner is where my light source is. So just think about if my light's here, it's shining on that spot on that circle. My circle is this area, and then this circle, that area. And you can see most of them start except for the one that's underneath. I'm just going to put a little circle at the end of the line, kind of representing that's where the light's shining. That is kind of where we don't want to color in. So those are areas, and I just marked it. I thought it would be easier for us to understand, like that's the area where it's really light. So what I want to do is go ahead and start to color. Okay, so the first coloring that I'm going to do is called stippling, and that is dots. The closer the dots are together, the darker it is. As the dots are spread out, that's the lighter it's going to be. So with anything, I'm just going to start off randomly putting some dots all over my circle. So I've got one layer of coverage of dots. So I've pretty much almost covered up the whole entire thing except for that one circle. Remember, that's where our light is. So we want it to have like almost like a shine in it. Kind of like when we talk about those eyes. If we draw an eye with a little bit of dot. So now what I'm going to do is add a second layer. So I know that this is the lightest area, so around that is going to be the next lightest. So think of it as layers. So I've got light, the lightest, light, and then darker. So now I'm going to add my second layer, and I'm not trying to go too close. I'm just kind of staying within one spot, and I can go all the way down because this is my second layer. So right from about that halfway mark, I go ahead and add my second layer. And I start to fill in all those dots. And so now I'm going to add my third layer, which is going to be my darkest. So you can see I'm not going to, now this side is going to be all at the bottom because this is underneath. This is where the most of the shadow is. So the more dots I add, the darker the area is going to look. And this one we can kind of go a little heavier too. We can add a lot of dots because we really want that to look. And I went a dot out of my circle, so try and a little bit higher. I'm going to go a little bit higher so that way it kind of falls into that one spot. And I'm just going to go back up here because I noticed that I want my circle to look like it's complete. I might put one or two dots inside my light, not too many. So there is my stippling. Okay, so that was stippling. Now we're going to try hatching. I'm going to use a pencil to hatch because I'm going to actually show you a technique where you use your finger to make it and smudge it all together. So hatching is one direction. So again, the closer this time, it's lines. So basically I'm going to go up and down, going ahead and drawing my lines. The first set of lines I'm going to kind of spread out. So I do some lines and I spread out. So again, I want to keep that area where I think the circle is. I don't want to put too many. I don't want to press with my pencil. It's much easier to go darker. It's much harder to go lighter. So I have that area, and I'm going to put maybe a couple lines through it, but not many. And then around that, I'm going to start my second layer. So I go ahead and start my second layer. And all it is again, it's just lines. And now I'm going to start my third layer. So I've got light, a medium, and now I'm going a little bit darker around the edges. And see, my lines are a little bit closer. And I understand that back here I have no light on it, so that's going to have a nice shadow. And it's probably going to curve just a little bit up into there. And so you can see how it goes medium, light to dark. And one thing I forgot with the stippling is, so not only do I have this to deal with, I can actually go ahead and draw a little shadow underneath. And it's usually an extension. So if my light is shining here, I know that my shadow is going to be in that area. So see how I continue that line? So there's the shadow there. Whereas my stippling was kind of almost underneath it. It's almost like a circle underneath that. And I'll go back before I'll finish this one first, and I'll go back and show you the stippling. And so the same thing, I'm just going to keep on hatching, and that's a dark one too, so all my lines are close together. Now with a pencil, this is just a 2B pencil. You can get other pencils to color and shade and do different things with, and some of them are softer. I can just take my finger and start to spread out my lead from my pencil, and it actually gives it a very nice effect. And this is just the oil from my hands. They're not gross or dirty, they're just the natural oil, and I can go ahead and start spreading it out, and it has like a nice effect. And if I go around and around, make sure I try to leave, see that little white is kind of popping out, and there's my shading right there. And I gotta go grab my marker to do my stippling. And so the same thing's gonna happen with my stipple. Remember, it is condensed, it's closer together because it's the shadow. And I'm just putting a bunch of dots underneath, really, really tight, because I want it to have the darkest spot. So underneath that shadow is gonna be even more. Put a little couple more in there. So you can see how that's starting to look. Okay. Our third one, we are going to do something that's called cross-hatching. And this one is just like hatching, but once you do all the hatching, then you can go across, and that's going to help us make even a more of a dark area. And before I start with my color pencil, I'm going to take, and I'm going to show you that shadow again is about almost the same as that one. Kind of goes out and around. So I'm going to go ahead and use my color pencil. So again, I'm going to start off with lines, and I'm not, with my colored pencils, the lines are going to get a little bit closer, so I'm doing them really, really soft. And I'm actually going to go ahead and just start my shadow. So I'm doing it really, really soft. So the second group around, I'm going to go in just a little bit into my color. And so my second one, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go the other way. So if I went that way, I went this way for my shadow, and I'm going to go up and down. So same thing, the closer and the more I press on my colored pencils. That's a little bit different with my colored pencils. I can go ahead, I go crisscross, I go back and forth, and you can just see, just by layering, I got a nice shadow. So the same thing. My colored pencils are really softer than my pencil was, so all I'm doing is just doing lines, one direction, and then another direction, and I can press a little bit harder. And then I can go back in that way. And as long as my lines, as I get closer to, I'm going to turn this just a tiny bit to get angle. As long as I control how hard I press it, and the spacing of my lines is going to make a big, big difference. So you can kind of see that starting to come out. So that one's just going back and forth, different directions. And so there is my cross hatching. All right, and my last one I'm gonna do with my color, my crayon. Okay, so this one's called contouring. So it's basically all it is following the edges of a line. So this is a circular object. So I'm following the contour. So a contour is the outline of something. So my lines for this last one are circular. So I might go ahead and start, I'm gonna start here at the bottom. I'm gonna show you that shadow again too. It's a little bit shorter and it's a little bit underneath and it might come over here just a little bit more. So that one is, this is my line. So it's circular. So I know at the bottom, and I can press with my crayon really hard as I get closer. You can see my lines, I can get them closer, but I can also press less. So with my crayon, the lines are close, and then as I get closer, I'm gonna press less and still keep them, maybe spread them out just a little bit more. And you can see down here I might put a couple more lines and press a little bit harder. So see how this one is just following the lines. It's following the curve of my sphere. Now it's a sphere. So you can see all those 4 different techniques. And this comes in handy when you go ahead and shade in different things. So when you go ahead and shade things, you know what you can play around with that lights and the darks, and it makes your object pop out just a little bit more. I'm gonna do a quick little drawing in a minute. I'll show you how we can put this into a drawing and use that. Here we go. I have drawn 2 cherries. I stuck with something circular to kind of keep up with this. And now what I'll do is I'm going to show you the light source and do a quick coloring just to get us started. All right, so my light source, I'm gonna say is coming from this angle. So actually, no, I'm gonna stay with the same angle that we worked with, just so that way it helps you. So here is my light source. So right here is a big spot, and then now this is the tricky part. So this is in front. So it's gonna be a little darker right here. But this side of my cherry is gonna have more light on it than this part, because this part right here is the harder part because it's overlapping. So when you have 2 things that overlap, you're gonna definitely see that darkness of it. I'm gonna do color pencils. And I think I'm just gonna stick with just doing some line. I'll do some hatching, so the straight line. So let's see. And then under here, I'm gonna probably do a little shadow. I'm gonna show you a little bit of a shade right here. I know that here is gonna be a dark area, so I'm just doing some lines just to kind of show us. And then I forgot to mention our shadow. Our shadows are gonna be right here, and it kind of almost creates one whole big one. And so let's start off with the shadow. So I'm going to just do some lines, just some nice straight lines, and almost like coloring it in. And when I get closer to my cherries, I'm going to really press hard, because that's right where the darkest area is right in there, and then ease up a little bit as I come away from those cherries. Okay, so now I got the shadow going on. So now I'm going to do some hatching, and I'm going to go straight across for this cherry, and then I'm going to go diagonally for that cherry. Since they're 2 different ones, I don't want the lines working against one another. So I'm going to do lines going this way for that cherry. And then I'm going to have the lines go this way for this cherry. And so this one, I'm definitely going to start pushing that edge. I know it gets a little bit darker behind there, and a little darker under there. So there's my lines going around. And I'm going to put a little color into my highlight, but not too much. And you can always use other colors. So up here, I'm gonna have a medium. I'm not gonna press too hard. I'm just gonna add another layer on. Maybe outline that top part just a tiny bit up there. And you can see that one. So now I'm gonna do this top one. And again, it's medium. And then it's gonna get darker on this side. So I press a little bit harder. My video camera is moving because my dog is deciding to lay up against it. So you'll have to excuse the motion. All right, so you can see the two cherries are coming out. I'll get some green for up on my stem. And my stem's the same idea. Like if my stem is colored, I can go ahead and color it, and I press hard on the dark side, which is this side, and the light is on that side. So I know I'm gonna go a little bit softer up close and down there. I might leave a little white popping through. And again, dark on one side, a little light coming through, maybe put a little brown in my stem. And then back here, I noticed I'm gonna put a couple lines. It is light, so I just gotta make sure I'm nice and soft with my pencil. And then I gotta press a little bit harder, I think, right in that area where that dark area where the two cherries meet. I'm gonna go back and press a little bit harder here too. So you can see my two cherries, and I think I'm gonna add a tiny bit of pink. Just a tiny bit here and there. It helps, sometimes it helps with the highlights and filling up some space, especially if you don't want all that darkness. So two colors that are similar or on that same spectrum, a different hue of it. So obviously my pink is a different hue than my cherry, and then I can go complementary color in my shadow down here. So if I just add a tiny bit of green, it's gonna actually work really well because that is a complementary, so it's going to end up being a little bit of black in there. So go back over with my. Okay, I hope you like this lesson. I hope you get something out of it. I hope it improves some of your drawing and some of your coloring. Until next time, enjoy.